Welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Dong, and I'm excited you're joining me today. In this podcast, I dive into mental health topics on relationships and overall well-being. With over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker, I share insights and invite expert guests who are passionate about making a positive difference. I started this podcast because I was frustrated with the often misleading or recycled information in social media involving self-help and the mental health field. My goal is to provide you with genuine, useful content that's educational and informative. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find our conversations both enlightening and empowering. I'm glad you're here.
Great.
Welcome to the podcast, What Would Sabrina Say? I'm your host and licensed clinical social worker, Sabrina Dong. Today with me, I have an amazing guest, Eric Inman, who is trained not only in involving therapy, but also the use of psilocybin and nature. How amazing to combine all those to support clients. Thanks so much, Eric, for joining me today to talk about nature and psilocybin and the benefits in psychotherapy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about yourself, what led you to this journey? Before we...
It's been a long journey. There's several components of it. 1, the nature piece, 2, the psychology piece, and 3, the outdoors piece. And they all kind of have their own pathways that combine for this. I've been outdoors a lot my life. And then I got really into skiing in my teens, and that was like the 90s when global warming first started making real headlines and everything. And I'm just kind of like, why don't we not do that? Why don't we stop? I started exploring alternative energies, and I found out we have them, and we're just choosing not to use them. We're just choosing this path. And so I was like, well, it's a psychology thing. I started to get into psychology also between high school and college. I went to a fish show and had a really powerful experience on psychedelics, what I now know to be a mystical experience after my training in psilocybin facilitation. But I had no idea what it was then. I went to study psychology in college, and they were kind of like, if you have these hallucinations or delusions or these kinds of things, you're crazy. You're institutionalized in the 90s. This wasn't something really recognized outside of a few schools. So I studied psychology just to kind of understand why people are making these choices. I went to West Virginia University, and I got into river guiding, raft guiding, and that's when I really started guiding other people down rivers. And it was just a gorgeous experience. It was the New River, and just every day on this river, and it's one of the oldest rivers in the world. And so every day I would go by this canyon that was carved through just hundreds of millions of layers of rocks, and just seeing this really different perspective on time, hundreds of millions of years, and kind of what we're doing now, and how our time is just this little layer in this massive canyon, and that started to change just my perspective on things, and living in a tent for the summer. And then after I graduated, I worked in residential. It was an interesting experience. And then when I moved to Oregon, I was able to combine rafting and psychology and work in wilderness therapy. And what the kids went through in that was so different than what they went through in the residential program. And it was pretty obvious that the outdoor component had so much of an effect on just the entire culture and the way that people showed up, and the way that people related to each other, and the way that they related to the program, and even the therapist and everyone kind of changed in that program. And I was like, everyone really could use something like this, not just troubled kids. But at the same time, they shut down, and it was because there's no funding for this. It's not covered by insurance. And then when I came back from Japan, I got into graduate school for school psychology, and they were very kind of categorical, the classification, the diagnoses. They're diagnosing the kids, and it was just so interesting seeing it from that perspective of all this stuff is going on in the kid's life, and they're just trying to focus in on, oh well, this is what's ADHD and what's this and that. It's like kids weren't in a good situation, or they just kind of didn't fit in the program. And rather than exploring their potential and what they want to do, it was more about getting them to be good in math, science, and English. The whole school system was funded on that. And at the same time, there was intro to lifespan development models. And I found Bill Plotkin's work on Nature and the Human Soul, which offered a developmental model from the eco-psychology perspective. And it's really the first lifespan development model that made sense to me. I didn't really have one before, and that one did, and it was from a nature-based perspective. I felt everything was too culturally influenced and socioeconomically influenced. So that kind of cut through all that. And that there was the idea that in order, like, we go through the first few stages naturally, but at some point we have to go on an intentional journey, and that changes the way that people see the world and themselves, and they learn what their gift is and what they can bring to culture and connection with everything, and like all these things that made sense during that fish show, during that mystical experience that I had, and a few experiences since, but no one ever really addressed before, especially in such detail. And so I started to go from that, and I started to explore from that perspective. And that was very different than the school psychology perspective. And there was a split there that happens in the graduate program. Fortunately, they did have an eco-psychology certificate and a cultural and psychological studies degree. And I was able to combine them and pursue that path, combine them. And ever since then, I've kind of been doing my own thing. And I have explored the vision quest. I worked with Animas Valley and Bill Plotkin for a little bit for a year-long soulcraft immersion, but I've really been also interested in bringing plant medicines into the whole picture, into the nature experience. I feel like they do align, and they help with these moments of different awareness. So yeah, that's kind of been my course, and I've been more trying to get really fun experiences, but still powerful, so people can speak to, or people who have no familiarity with this can kind of sign up for. A vision quest is like 10 days in the woods, 3 not eating, or 3 not in community, 4 not, while they're not eating. And that's a big ask for a lot of people. Even what I'm doing is still a big ask. Yeah, that's the background of it.
So your own journey and experiences with nature, with your own mystical journey, led to your Master's of Arts in Culture and Psychological Studies. So exploring more about psychology and combining it with nature and eco-psychology. So not just about culture as human beings, but how we connect. I think sometimes we forget we're mammals. We're not meant to be in these cement blocks of space, right? And how therapeutic accessing nature and being more in tune with it and ourselves can really help us heal and help us maybe go deeper into things.
We are a technological and societal species, but we also need to balance that with our connection with nature, right? We're not doing such a great job of running the show. We've got to have that grounding, that wisdom that comes from something larger than us. And we are an extremely powerful species. We're the most, we're a species that has the ability to alter the ecosystems. And if we do it with only our interests in mind, then we create imbalance. And we've been doing that for a long time. And at this point, it's really starting to accumulate, and we're looking at the consequences of that, the long-term consequences of those actions kind of really coming up on us. And I believe we really have to start taking our position with more awareness of the responsibility that comes with that, and really working with nature to be more mindful about our presence on this planet. And that's the larger picture culturally and personally, each person kind of going through that. The part of the mystical experience is the recognition of the connection to the oneness of everything. And at that point, it's not so much a concept, but something that is vivid in people's experience, and it also feels fantastic, right? It's just this, it's an amazing feeling. And so people love being there, and that what that mean, like that state. And just, a lot of it is about, one, not just a knowledge based thing, but actually experiencing things. And two, not like a responsibility, like we have to do this, but like actually really loving it and saying, how do I live further into this way of being? Because too, because it is a really fantastic feeling. Yeah.
So, why is being in nature so helpful for us? Can you explain or share, keeping confidentiality in mind, about what you observe and experience people go through during this vision quest? And what do you notice, people being more empathetic towards each other, compassionate, kind of let go of things? Just wondering, for those who might not be familiar what vision quests are or this journey, like what would one expect?
Yeah, absolutely. And a vision quest is what a lot of, and people have their own names for it. Animus Valley calls it an underworld journey. I've gone to a couple wilderness guides council, and they use the words vision quest, and everyone got rites of passage, and everyone has their own language for it. But vision quest is a good kind of catch-all, I think, personally. But the that type of experience really, a lot of this is really about letting go of the ego and its grip on things, which is essentially our conscious representation of our individual physical mortal selves, right? And the balance of the ego is soul, which is our connection with everything. It goes on beyond time and space, and yeah, it's not just connected to this life, but it's connected to all of life. So it's this balance of that. And a lot of the vision quests and a lot of these things are about letting go of that ego. A lot of the ceremonies, regardless of the ceremony, you'll hear people talk about ego death, things like that. And so getting into that space, and then we connect with the space all around us, right? And that's tougher to do in our self-created kind of human-made world, where we are really a lot of the times disconnected from the ecosystems, from the other beings, from, and essentially from a different part of ourselves, a place of soul. And we can get there, but it's not the same thing. And I don't know that we can really stay there in an extended period. Whereas we're in nature, the the soul really steps forward. That's its home base. I think the ego's home base is in our human made worlds. And so it just, the more time people spend there, they think about things differently, they see things differently, and they just connect to not only the world around them, but this different sense of consciousness within them.
Uh, I'm trained in ketamine assisted psychotherapy. I've heard a lot of research about psilocybin and the benefits across many symptoms, whether it's depression, addiction. And so I was just wondering if you can touch on your own work through Evolve Wild, and again, what does it help to treat, or what it can, people can benefit from?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a fantastic question. It's really amazing, ever since it's become legal again, how many different things psilocybin works on. You mentioned anxiety, depression, grief and loss, trauma, addiction, and a whole lot more. I think well, there's a couple of ways I could go. What it does is essentially it quiets the default mode network. Our typical way of seeing things, or our typical thoughts and habits and patterns, and a lot of our defense mechanisms, and allows what's going on, back here in the subconscious to come forward, because everything else is quieted down. And with that, people can really work on all these things that are coming up differently. And I think a lot of the diagnoses, the anxiety or depression, trauma. There's something deeper that's happening in people, and it's manifesting in certain ways. It shows up in certain ways for different people. A lot of it, the root is really disconnection, not only from the natural world, but people's authentic selves. There's something getting in the way of them accessing their true self, whether it's self judgment or defense mechanisms around safety or trauma, safety or due to trauma or whatever it is, but people aren't allowing themselves to express themselves freely. And this really allows people to look at what that is and come into a different relationship in a lot of ways. Part of the research is showing that there's a lot of neuroplasticity that happens.
It's just exciting to see in the research how it rewiring or connecting with the neuroplasticity, how it's doing that and helping you reach deeper, where I think our coping mechanisms don't allow us, right, in our day to day to access that. And so I think it's important to talk about the difference in how this is actual treatment or intervention versus maybe somebody choosing to microdose and have their own experiences. So wanting to touch on that too, about the importance of how you might guide or create that safety or containment in an experience and what that looks like at Evolve Wild.
So I think microdosing allows people to feel something a little bit and guide them towards what they can feel, right? That's a very vague way of saying it, but it's subtle, but there's a different awareness that kind of they open up to. And macrodosing is a really powerful experience where people can oftentimes see what it is behind that guiding, what it is that's going on. Like they can really see the bigger picture of what really would create powerful healing for them. And I think microdosing works better after a macrodose. As far as what that looks like, though, there are a few different outcomes from larger doses of mushrooms. And I think a lot of people are familiar with kind of just what I call doing shrooms, which is more of a social thing. And they'll eat mushrooms and they'll do something social, like go to a concert or go to a party, and they'll be elevated and it'll be more fun. And maybe they'll tap into something a little deeper, but it won't be a full on journey. And then there's the two really powerful experiences that people have, which are the bad trip and the mystical experience, right? So that's when people are really in this ethereal space and things are kind of happening, and the bad trip is when things go wrong and they don't want to be in that space anymore. And the mystical experience is when everything aligns and they can sit with what comes up and really allow for the journey to unfold in a unfettered way, in a really free way. So yeah, so they can experience what the mushrooms have to say. And I think a lot of the facilitated process is to minimize the risk of that bad trip and help people move into mystical experience. And that's the thing. When people have that, they report a ton of health benefits from, and they rank it as one of the most emotionally or psychologically impactful experiences of their lives, up there with the birth of a first child or the death of a parent or something like that. It's a real life experience when it happens. And even the term mystical experience is fairly new to me. Animas Valley calls them soul encounters, and there's just different kinds of ways of hallucinations or whatever. There's different kinds of ways of describing it, but that's what I learned during my mushroom facilitators training here in Oregon. The first year it was legal. The whole process around that is essentially the first step is a screening. So we talk with people and make sure there are no counterindications that would lead to a bad experience, specifically schizophrenia or bipolar 1, and then also just exploring people's intentions. If people just if people don't have a lot of intention around making use of the journey or any self-work, there might not be many benefits that come from it if people just aren't into that kind of thing. So that's the mindset piece of it, the set and setting. Usually people who seek out facilitation are ready for a little bit more of a powerful experience. So step 1 is a screening. Step 2 is a more in-depth preparation session. People I work with have a full preparation form we'll send to people, and it will take a while to fill out. And we go through that in depth with people and really get into what may arise on the journey, what people are working through, and just help people explore this space a little deeper and help us understand why they're coming to us and what kind of work they're trying to move through. After that, there's the mushroom day. That's a experience in a legal service center, so a place specifically designated for mushroom journeys with the facilitator there the whole time. We do we do facilitation and group journeys. So the facilitator to journey ratio is usually around 3-1. Sometimes we'll go a little higher if we know people are dealing with really severe trauma, or they want the full-on higher dose. We're required to keep a higher facilitator ratio for that. Then there's music aligned with the journey to help open up to all this. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Then after that is the integration. And that's in the typical facilitation, that's either done over Zoom or in person a few times. With Evolve Wild, we not only do the online personal preparation, we have a group preparation, and we do an activity the day before the mushroom journey. It's a 5-day journey. They're all 5-day journeys. Preparation activity, something like paddleboarding or hiking, just to allow people that space to move from their everyday life into this journey, connect with nature, and kind of just prepare last minute and really step into a different mindset and physical space. Second day is the mushroom day. And then we spend 3 days afterwards in natural environments. And that's when neuroplasticity is really happening. I mean, there's a critical period of 2 weeks, which is a big commitment for a lot of people. Even 3 days, 5 days it can be challenging to get people to commit to that. But yeah, we spend that time in nature, 3 days afterwards in nature, to allow people to create those new neural pathways in a really healthy environment, the healthiest environment I can imagine, to unpack what comes up and to allow to speak back, because they've stepped into this intentional space. They've asked something of the universe, of mystery, of whatever you want to call it. And in nature, it has a chance to respond. Things do show up, things arise, patterns emerge. I mean, it's really, that's its where it communicates, I think.
I think the preparation is so important, because sometimes people have asked, like, if they could just journal or process or talk to you about their microdose experience. And I really think the preparation, the environment really makes a difference in being able to have that deeper experience and to process things. And then also the after care, the support there, right, of helping to process or unpack things. Having almost a guide there is really helpful as well, too, as well as having some exercises and doing that around nature, can imagine is really helpful compared to maybe just someone trying to do something on their own and connect with a counselor. I think you have to do the whole experience to really receive the benefits from it.
Yeah. People doing it on their own it's kind of a crapshoot. You don't know what you're going to get. And a lot of people know that there's a set and setting element to it, especially if they're doing the macrodose. Microdosing, you can kind of just do and go about your day, maybe in a little bit more aligned way. I mean, you essentially have more agency than the mushrooms. And so even if people are microdosing, you can feel better, but they can also choose to ignore certain things that might be, I think a lot of people's difficulties, not all of them, but a lot of it just lives in their everyday choices they make and they take for granted that aren't aligning with who they are or aren't working with them. And it's easy to gloss over those bigger things in life on sub-perceptual doses. Whereas when you're going through a full journey, that stuff comes up, but also stuff might come up that people aren't prepared for. The setting might not be conducive to it at all. I mean, that's a real bad trip if people take a macrodose, they're in an ethereal space, and then something happens in their physical environment that they need to take care of, that they have to deal with, but their default mode network is shut down, so they just can't. They can't deal with something that would be far easier in an unaltered state. And then they say, I want this to stop. And it doesn't. And then that's just having that safe space is half of the journey, but also really having that deeper intention. The music is a big thing. And there's an arc to the music that aligns with the arc to the journey, which opens things up psychologically. And yeah, just having that connection, that time that like so much comes up during the mushroom journey, and it just kind of happens boom, 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 boom. And it's so powerful. And people think, oh, I'm not going to forget this. And right after it's kind of gone, having that space without a schedule or an agenda and just sitting with it and unpacking it and working through it and talking about it and sharing it, anchoring it in language makes it more real, right? And it also makes it more memorable. And so, yeah, just having that space to work through everything and to sit with that journey creates a whole different experience around it, and in my opinion, a whole different level of long-term integration or help bring it back into people's lives or their world.
Definitely. It's a great term of integrating it in that experience, right? And I know you mentioned it takes place over a few weeks, but I definitely think it's worth it for people who might be suffering and going through symptoms. And I talk about the energy it takes to cope in patterns that might not serve us. And if you invest in yourself and experience those benefits, it's really worth it. And I think a journey like that would definitely be worth it for someone who's looking for an alternative way to heal and to process things and get that safe containment and support.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm just wanting to touch on the integration and what that looks like afterwards.
Yeah, we have a couple of journeys depending on the season. Right now, we're in the midst of the Umpqua journey season, which is first day hiking Silver Falls in Oregon. It's a beautiful little hike with multiple waterfalls. 2 streams come together on this series of steps. So you can do a loop and see several different waterfalls, and there's waterfalls you can walk behind. And then the second day is mushrooms in Salem. My friends gather. And then third day is kind of usually the third day people are zonked after a mushroom journey. So it's a day of rest, but it's in the Umpqua Valley, and there's hot springs and waterfalls, and just it's such a magical place. It's between Crater Lake and I-5. So there's just not a whole lot in there except for this national forest. And then the fourth and fifth day. So fourth day, the night of the third day, we camp at the put in for the river. And then the morning of the fourth day after breakfast, we raft down the first half of the river of the North Umpqua River, camp halfway, and then the fifth day we raft out. And that's the physical aspect of it. And that goes usually until mid-July this season with water levels low, and we're kind of calling it early July just because of water levels and fire risk. And then later in the summer, we go to the Cascade Lake journey, which is 2 days in Portland's. And there's a couple of service centers we work with here in Portland's. The first day is paddling, just a paddling activity, either flat water or some easy whitewater, guided. And some people get their own lodging. The second day is the mushroom journey. Third through fifth day, we go to an alpine lake in the Cascade Mountains. We have our own private campground, and each campground is next to each other, but you can't really see, like they all have space so people can do their own processing and just sit with a lot of stuff, or they can kind of come and join the group and talk with staff or whatever people need. It's really, and it's on an alpine lake, so people can paddleboard out at any time they want and just sit with it. We have yoga. One of our facilitators does massage. And so if they're on that trip, one of our facilitators does breath work, but really just, yeah, just sitting in that space and allowing things to unfold in its own way. Yeah, in this beautiful place.
That sounds like such an amazing experience to go through. And I can imagine people feel like closer and connected to each other as a group too, going through that in their week as well.
Absolutely. Closer connected to the group. I mean, yeah, and into the whole journey, into the, even it's amazing just the difference in dreams that people have when they're outdoors versus indoors. But yeah, I think people who don't have experience with psychedelics worry about coming into it. How am I going to do the preparation, right? Like, is this safe? Is this and that? And I mean, it's just funny, just how much of that anxiety just drops away right when they go into the medicine. Oh, okay, and then the journey just happens. But sitting with it afterwards is something people don't really take into account coming in. You don't really know what's going to happen during the journey, and you don't know how it'll unfold afterwards. People don't have experience with this kind of stuff. A lot of times people tell us, like, I don't know what I would have done if I wasn't doing this journey. I mean, I'm glad psychedelics are legal. I think there should be more framework around the integration. I mean, mushrooms and nature just go so well together. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me not to do without nature, but I've done the mushroom journey in the space in the service centers, and they're really powerful inward journeys, but just having that space around it to really connect and to deepen everything and just to sit with it and unpack it. And when I did my journeys indoors afterwards is when I kind of like enjoying it and enjoying the hallucinations and going through things. But like the day after, when I'm sitting by a river, is when I'm just like bawling. It's when things really bubble up for me. And I know it's not like that for everyone, but I mean, there's a lot that's still happening, that's still moving through people after the journey.
I think too, some people don't like to feel out of control, right? And so that could feel uncomfortable, or that might bring up some fears around not being in control of the journey and what comes up or what happens. And that's where that process that you provide, the education, the support, explanation, music, the environment really helps with, I think, easing people into it and being more comfortable. Containment.
Yeah. I don't want to lose control. I get that a lot. That's people's number one fear. There's a lot of fears around this. There's a lot of hesitations and barriers. One is the psychological aspect, like, do I feel safe doing this? Two is the comfort with nature. I don't spend time outdoors. I don't want to do. Three is kind of the difference between a facilitated journey and the cost and the time required for that versus just like eating some mushrooms. I've talked to a lot of people, and I myself have done it, where I just buy some mushrooms and then I wait for the perfect time, and it never appears. It's really difficult to create that setting on your own. And then the mushrooms, they lose potency after a certain amount of time. I mean, there's a lot of barriers to it that people are concerned about, and that I don't want to lose control is kind of the biggest one. And I think that's kind of what holds people. That's what keeps people stuck in a lot of ways, is that they're doing things, they're moving through what they feel like they need to move through, and there's something behind everything they're doing that in a way is guiding their life, right? And they're trying to keep control by doing the things they're doing and keeping in the mind state they're used to, and just holding on to these patterns. But there's also something nudging at them that they know isn't right, that they know is not working for them, but they don't want to let that go. And that's what the journey's about, is really about allowing some release and allowing the mushrooms to show people what it needs to show them, and sitting with all that. And it's a challenge. It is a challenge to kind of like step into that space a little bit. There's a lot of support. We'll help you through the whole process. but it is ultimately up to each person to step into it and to take on the journey themselves. I mean, most of the time, what people are afraid of isn't the real problem. It's just that fear keeps them from doing it. And that's what it is. It's the ego. The way I see it is the ego is saying, "Oh, that's dangerous. That's not my realm. Let's just keep it here." And then people just continue to do what they're going to do rather than take that step and let go of a bit of that control.
The education, the support can certainly be helpful, the guidance discussions around it. And it's not legal, unfortunately, in all states, and I wish it was to support and get the benefits. It's great that you've experienced it as well, too. I think that's important as clinicians offering this guidance to have that experience personally as well. I know it's not always a recommendation or requisite, but I certainly think that's helpful for people too. I'm just wondering, Eric, where people can reach you for more information or to learn more about your practice at Evolve Wild, if there's a website or if you're on social media.
Yeah. EvolveWild.com is my website. Social media is a bit restricted. Facebook and Instagram won't allow us to talk about psilocybin. They'll take down posts. I've had accounts banned. So YouTube is the platform I've been using. Yeah, that's the same thing at Evolve Wild. That's a good place. That's where I do most of it. I do some outreach on LinkedIn. I'm happy to work with other therapists and counselors and life coaches. If anyone has psychedelic integration, they have clients that are interested in this kind of work, I'm happy to give referral commissions. And it's when someone comes and they have someone in their everyday life that they do have this relationship with, that they can connect to, that can help bring their journey forward, and they're in it from before all through it. That's a powerful figure. It's a powerful figure in the journey to really provide that grounding in everyday life, because there's only so much we can do in that regard being here in Oregon. So yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, though, Eric. And I've learned so much about it. So everyone, if you'd like to learn more about Evolve Wild with Eric Inman, Masters of Arts in Cultural and Psychology Studies and Certificate in Eco-Psychology, so unique in helping with combining the benefits of nature, psilocybin, and helping people go deeper into their journey. And appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.